Hello and welcome to another episode of The Laws That Matter. I'm your host, Carissa Kranz, and today we have some great Jewish thought vegan leaders in the house. We have Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's an author and president emeritus of the Jewish Vegetarians of North America, and he has a lot to talk about in terms of Judaism and veganism. And plus, we have one of the top 50 rabbis in America and one of the top 50 most influential Jews, and he's vegan, and it's Rabbi Shmuly. So without further ado, welcome both of you for joining me today.
Thank you.
I just want to get, just right to it. Let's start with you, Rabbi Shmuly. What is your vegan journey? I was reading your bio on Newsweek. You certainly are full of accomplishments. You donated a kidney to a stranger. I mean, you live by example. So tell us your vegan journey and when you became vegan and how you link that to Judaism and kashrut.
Absolutely. Amazing. Wow. There's a ton of questions there. I'll try to jump right to the heart of it. So I was a massive beef eater. I ate meat all day, like every day. And no one had even told me otherwise. That's what I understood to be normal and understood to be good. And then I had a spiritual elevation. I had a spiritual consciousness shift where I started to understand empathy. I started to realize my impact in the world. And once that happened on an emotional and cognitive and spiritual level, it opened me up in all kinds of directions. And one of the most profound was an understanding what was happening to animals, understanding the ethics of what I was consuming in my body. And so that was my vegetarian shift. And then when
was that? How long ago?
That I was in grad school. I was in my early 20s. So that was I'm 39 now. So that was almost 20 years ago, or 15 to 20 years ago. And then on our wedding day, my wife and I got married. On our wedding day, we became vegan because we said, starting now, if we're going to be together in this, we're going to build a home, we're going to build a family that's going to be on elevated principles and beliefs. And we can support each other in that journey. And so for me, I realized that the actualization of kosher, the next era of what the Torah, what the Jewish religion was teaching about keeping kosher, was about a total vegan diet. And that Judaism needed to be at the forefront of advocating this, not just for health and environmental reasons, but for core ethical and religious principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a show previously with some other Jewish thought leaders and rabbis, and they gave me a real aha moment on the air. I've always known about kosher certification, and I do BeVeg vegan certification, but I loved it when he said that vegan is the true kosher because you can't take an animal to slaughter. He said, we may have slaughter procedures that might make it kosher and blessings, but he says there's no way to have a truly kosher slaughter when you're raising the animals and raping them in poor conditions and abusing them and taking away their babies. You violated so many religious, Jewish, spiritual laws in order to get that animal to slaughter that vegan is the real kosher. And I just loved that marketing concept and truth. It was such a revelation because, I see you wanting to say something.
No, that's so beautifully said. I agree with everything you just stated. And I think one of the powerful things about Jewish law and tradition is that it is intended to evolve. It is intended to progress. It's true that there were times in Jewish history where it was permitted in the past to slaughter animals. And yet we were waiting for this moment. We were waiting for this new era where not only did we hit a rock bottom in terms of factory farming and just the most atrocious things happening to animals, but also that we now have the opportunity in new light to actualize what kosher can truly be about, as you just stated. That it is antithetical to kosher and to the Jewish religion to kill an animal in the name of God today.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it's important to, because what I didn't say in the last thing is I just addressed meat, but dairy also violates a whole host of ethical, spiritual, religious laws in terms of bringing the dairy to market. The way the cows are raped, the way they have the rape rack, they rape the cows, they take their milk, then they send them to slaughter, and that's the dairy industry.
You're totally right. And in addition to the religious laws that exist, I think where we can all unite on an interfaith level is that what it means to be a person of faith, what it means to be a person of spirituality, is reducing our causing of suffering to others. Right? This has to be like level number one. Number one, if you're a spiritual person, if you're a religious person, is that you stop causing suffering to others. That has to be the first principle. And to see our complicity, the moral complicity that we're involved with eggs and dairy and meat and all these animal products, that has to be the first place. Forget prayer. Don't even go pray until you stop being so complicit. And once, God doesn't want our prayers until we are actually being godlike.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I want to give Dr. Richard Schwartz a chance to speak. Thank you for joining us, Richard. So for those that don't know, he's President Emeritus of the Jewish Vegetarians of North America. He has a book that came out recently that he can talk about. So go ahead, Richard. Tell us about your vegan journey. Yes, the book, The Vegan Revolution. Tell us all about your book, your vegan journey, your spirituality, and, your platform.
Okay, first I want to say what a great pleasure it is to be on your show, especially with Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz, who's one of my heroes. Unbelievable what he's doing, starting Shamayim, a wonderful group on that. And of course, I wish you both much continued success. Okay, as far as my journey, it really started at the College of Staten Island. I was teaching math to liberal arts and science students, poorly motivated, poorly prepared. So I came up with this idea of creating a brand new course called Mathematics and the Environment. Same kind of math, statistics, probability, sequences, all kinds of things, but all related to what's happening in the world. One year we're discussing world hunger. But what a shame, so many people are dying. Maybe there's just too many people in the world. I read this wonderful book by Francis Moore-Lapay, you may be familiar with it, Diet for a Small Planet. Pointed out how wasteful animal-based diets are. Millions of people are dying of hunger, and it affects every year. An estimated 10% of the world's people are chronically malnourished, and yet 70% of the grain produced in the U.S. fed to animals destined for slaughter. So discussing that a number of times, I said, if we ate less meat, what a difference that would make. Finally took my own advice. 1978, January 1st, became a vegetarian. Years later, seeing, as we discussed before, how horribly dairy cows and egg-laying hens are treated, became a vegan. And the case was so strong, I felt I had to get that message out. I felt, I'm about to shoot for eternity to Judaism. I felt there's so many people watching me, but I had to put it together, and thank God. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with such great teachings from the Bible, from the Talmud. So I wrote first edition in 1978, Judaism and Vegetarianism, 2 editions later. And now this book is to say Vegan Revolution. And 2
Show
important
us your book cover again. Show us your title. Show us the cover.
You want to see the book again?
Yeah, show it on the screen. Go in the middle.
To see the whole
There
thing.
you go. The Vegan Revolution.
Okay,
yeah, there you go.
Saving the world, revitalizing Judaism.
Yeah.
2 really fundamental, super important things. One is that animal-based diets and agriculture seriously violate at least 6 Jewish fundamental mandates. These are to take care of our health, to treat animals with compassion, preserve the environment, conserve natural resources, help hungry people, and seek and pursue peace. So that is the thing that every Jew should be a vegan. Here in Israel, 5%, we're the world's capital in veganism, but far too little. Many more should. And the second, maybe third important concept is the world is now heading toward a climate catastrophe. We see evidence that's all the time. It was just announced that the year 2020 tied 2016 as the hottest year in recorded history. And that means that every year this century, 21 years, they're among the top 22 hottest years. And the glaciers are melting, the polar ice caps, the permafrost is melting, more and more frequent storms, serious storms, wildfires in California, unbelievable. More storms this year. They had to go 9 letters into the Greek alphabet. They usually have Sally and Joe and all the English letters. They had to go into the Greek alphabet. So there's no way we're going to avert a climate catastrophe unless there's a major shift toward vegan diets, and not to mention the health aspect. That we could reduce cancer, heart disease, all the chronic life-threatening diseases if there was a major shift. It's almost like I say, medical practice today is very often malpractice if the doctors don't tell people about the many positive benefits. We can reverse type 2 diabetes, in many cases reverse heart disease even. But so it's really shameful that this doesn't happen. And hoping with Shmuly to reach out to rabbis and say, stop ignoring the many ways that animal diets and agriculture seriously violate Jewish values. Stop ignoring the epidemic of diseases afflicting the Jewish community, other communities, and that if we want a decent world for children, grandchildren, future generations, to avert climate change and all the other negative environmental effects, not to mention the wasteful use of water, energy, land, and the effect on world hunger, the scandal. What makes it even more of a scandal, one other point, we take very healthy foods, corn and oats and soy, high in complex carbohydrates and fiber, zero cholesterol and saturated fat. We feed them through with animals, and what do? We end up with just the opposite. Meat, dairy, eggs, very high in cholesterol, saturated fat, and devoid of fiber and complex carbohydrates. Human beings were created as herbivorous. Look, Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, God's first dietary law is strictly vegan. And this is due to our modern science. Our hands, our teeth, our intestinal system, our stomach acids, all much closer to herbivorous animals and carnivorous. But most people have an omnivorous diet, and that's why that's that epidemic of diseases I mentioned afflicting the Jewish community and other communities.
Okay, a lot there, a lot of information. I think to sum that up, because your book I'm sure covers a lot, and everyone should get your book. You want to show it again, but it's that meat and dairy is the most inefficient food supply chain. It's detrimental to our health. We're headed for a climate catastrophe. It's unkind, uncompassionate, unreligious, and violates all spiritual laws. And there's no reason to not be vegan. I think that's the bottom line. So, Rabbi Shmuly, it's your turn to weigh in. It looks like you have a book to show off as well in your hands there. And we have Paige weighing in, wanting to know what you're creating for 2021. So
awesome. It's great to hear from Professor Schwartz, and just he's been an advocate for decades in this and has been a hero of so many of ours. So I'll give a plug to the Jewish Vegan, something I edited. The Jewish Vegan, which has people like, Jews like Professor Peter Singer, to Mayim Bialik, to Dr. Joel Kahn, and a whole range of voices. And then more recently from SUNY Press, we wrote Jewish Veganism and Vegetarianism, Studies in New Directions. So those two books might be of interest to folks. And in terms of 2021, we're really pushing hard our Synagogue Vegan Challenge. Our Synagogue Vegan Challenge is where we're in partnership with Veg Fund. We're giving micro grants to synagogues that are bringing veganism into their not only onto the plates but into their education on food justice and of Jewish ethics in there. And then we're working with college students around the country to make their campuses go vegan and to educate on campus. We do spiritual retreats every year where we bring people together for learning and for activism. And that's just the beginning. I don't want to speak too long, but that kind of scratches the surface.
Well, it's okay. We have the hour here. So I think it's important. I mean, you're one of Newsweek's top 50 rabbis in the country. You're considered one of the top 50 most influential Jews. So you stand in a position of real power to use your influence to help enlighten and educate. So how are you really doing that to get to, like, for example, I went to undergrad at University of Florida. I went to law school at Berkeley. I got a master's in journalism at Northwestern. And all three schools had Chabad centers. And I went to the Chabad for Friday night because it was what kids wanted to do. We wanted to go to have a Friday night free dinner, right? That's what it was. And these Chabad rabbis are popular. And I loved my rabbi. I'm still friends with them, but they're not vegan. And they've admitted to me many times that they feel like the future is right. I'm on the right track. Like they get it, but that hasn't changed their Shabbat dinners. How can you do that? How you're in a position of influence to go into these campuses, and you're young, you're hip, you have energy about you. People are going to vibrate towards you and be magnetically attracted to you. How can you go and affect systemic change?
It's becoming easier and easier because the vegan food alternatives are just as good, if not better, on a taste level, and on the affordability now that we can advocate for those changes. Many people want to make these changes and they don't know how. They need the resources to know how to make those changes. And I've always said we need more than a political revolution. We need a spiritual revolution. That we need faith-based groups to rise up and do that. And in the Jewish community, we do that as support and as challenge. That we see it very strange. We see movements that seem to care about every population. They talk about racism and sexism and refugees and poverty and all these crucial issues. And then they serve lunch and they serve meat and dairy, whatever the case is. And there's a hypocrisy or a blind spot would be a more gentle way to say it. And so we're working that those agencies that are already working to create change on many fronts need to incorporate this as well. So we're trying to coach them and support them. Chabad is an interesting case where, their theology is very much rooted in animal product consumption. Nonetheless, we do see people who are participating in those communities are pushing on a grassroots level for the change in their institutions. We have one Chabad rabbi who's a part of our network who's already gone vegan and is doing that within his own Chabad. That's certainly an anomaly.
Where is that? Which Chabad is that?
Up in Montreal, Rabbi Yisrael Bernath.
I don't think it would be such an anomaly if they were educated and you were able to reach them, because I really felt like the one that I knew when I was in college back, and this is a while ago. I graduated college in 2006. So, I mean, even back then we had the conversations, and even more so now. They reach out to me. They're really proud of me. They're proud of the work. They're watching the shows. They think I'm onto something. Like, they are not against it. And they believe that in the time of, where, the Moshiach will return, that we should be vegan. They do not disagree with this. So how do we get them to say now, like, you know what, maybe we should transition now. We're serving all these people, thousands of people on a Friday night and Saturday for free, all this food, and people are going because they want a free dinner. These are college students. And I think these rabbis are exposed to an environment where they may have grown up ultra-Orthodox, but once they go into these college campuses, they change. They wake up.
Yes.
They evolve. So it's not only that they're providing spiritual nutrition and evolution and accessibility to the students, but the students are also helping the rabbis and the sect, evolve into what it should become.
That's right.
Which is a mainstream, vegan, compassionate diet in any house of prayer. Right. Any house of prayer should not be praying over dead bodies on their plate.
That's right.
What it is.
Yep, that's very well said. And I think that, to use their language, they want Mashiach now. They want the Geula, they want the redemption now. And to see that they can engage more students by going vegan, because more students want that and need that. They can see that they can help bring redemption by creating a more nonviolent world, a world of peace, a world of respect and dignity, and engage more students in Torah and mitzvot, in this religious practice, because this is the new religious identity, that really is born out of the vegan consciousness and what that means for respect for land and for body and for all of life.
Okay, you just said something so important. I don't know if you realize what you said, but you said religious identity. Veganism is a religious identity. And, Dr. Schwartz, you can jump in at any time. You don't need to wait to be called on. That's the joy of having everyone here. Everyone should jump in, interrupt each other, have a conversation. But I want to bring up something really important of what you just said, because I don't know if you even understand the magnitude of how important that is in terms of legalities and constitutional protections. Spiritual identity. So under our Constitution, the law, the Equal Protection Law, protects marriage equality, race, gender, disability, religion. Okay, veganism is a firmly held belief system based on ethics that we all practice religiously. It is a spiritual identity that deserves legal and constitutional protection, and right now does not have it, which is something that I like to talk about and address, because as a lawyer and a vegan from birth, I think that this is something that is very much missed in the vegan movement, as vegans are so focused on the animal rights movement and they take their egos out of it. A lot of times they're completely unaware of how they are discriminated against themselves. They're so busy advocating for the discrimination of animals and the persecution of animals that they're unaware of how persecuted they are in the workplace, or the fact that, you know, they don't have equal rights of nutritious food in places of public accommodation, or that their vegan claims on labels don't have the same consumer protection laws as other claims on labels like allergens or gluten-free or even kosher right now. So saying that veganism is a spiritual identity is a big step in gaining constitutional protection for us as vegans, a group of people, not a trend. We are not a diet. Keto is a diet. Plant-based is a diet. Veganism is not a diet. And I think vegans listening to this show need to understand that they have rights.
Yeah, let me say one more thing about that, because I think that in addition to those rights, I think there's another piece of it, that people who are sensitive, morally sensitive, spiritually sensitive, can experience trauma when they see animal products. The trauma that emerges from cruelty. Now think of Nietzsche. Remember Nietzsche, the great late 19th century German philosopher? Nietzsche had a breakdown, a mental breakdown, when he saw someone whipping a horse. They were whipping a horse, and he threw himself between the whip and the horse, and then fell down crying and had a breakdown. And I think also many people, when they are pushed into workplaces or into school environments where they are this form of cruelty is in front of them, and they are deeply sensitive people, this causes a suffering as well.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, Dr. Schwartz,
some of the things that you've both been saying, like Carissa, you said there's no reason for Jews or anybody else not to be vegans, and Shmuly, you sort of reinforced it by talking about the wide variety of plant-based meat substitutes. Some of them are so similar in texture and taste that people that have been eating meat for decades can't tell the difference. And so there's been tremendous progress on that, so it's not like people have to give up and really not have good tasting food. And Shmuly, you were mentioning that Chabad rabbis, they say we want Mashiach now. Key thing is Rav Abraham Isaac Cohen Cook, former chief rabbi of Free State Israel, indicated that the Messianic period will actually be a vegetarian or maybe a vegan period, basing that on the powerful prophecy of Isaiah, that in that ideal time the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the lion will extort the ox, no one shall hurt nor destroy in all of God's holy mountain. And I want to just get into some of the things, we need to really break through the resistance, the apathy. So there's a couple of ideas I've really been promoting. First of all, exactly 2 weeks from tonight, Tu B'Shvat, the most vegetarian, the most environmental holiday starts. I have started a campaign that it's called this, Celebrating Tu B'Shvat as if global survival matters. I'm trying to really arrange all kinds of Tu B'Shvat seders, and this is with all kinds of fruits and blessings and very environmental. I myself, because of Zoom, it was amazing with all the negatives of coronavirus. Zoom is such an amazing thing, and so happy to be in this program. I am going to be involved in facilitating 4 different Tu B'Shvat seders, and of course bringing up the environmental message that, again, Tu B'Shvat is the holiday, the birthday of trees, And right at the beginning, God gave us the herbs of the field and the fruits from the trees. So doing that, now in addition, Tu B'Shvat is one of 4 Jewish New Years. We all know about Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, Yom Kippur, the High Holy Day. There's also another one of the 4, which was the New Year for animals. Now, actually, it started in the temple days. It was tithing for sacrifices. What we want to do is restore that, but to transform it, a New Year for animals, transform it into a day devoted to increasing awareness of Judaism's powerful teachings on compassion for animals and how far the realities are today from those compassionate teachings. In Judaism teaches we are to be Rahmanim b'nei Rahmanim. That's compassionate children of compassionate ancestors. We are supposed to imitate a God whose compassion is over all of his works, all of his creatures, according to Psalms 145, verse 9. And Judaism has such powerful teachings on animals. It's part of the 10 Commandments that animals as well as people should be allowed to rest on a Sabbath day. Person has a pet, you have to make sure that pet is fed before you sit down to your own meal. And according to Jewish tradition, the greatest Jewish hero we're starting to read about in the Torah readings now, we've entered the book of Exodus, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our great leader. According to a midrash, a rabbinic teaching, he was chosen to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, to be the Jewish leader because of compassion for animals, that when he was a youth as a shepherd. Same with King David, and also very powerful teachings. It's a test for righteousness because Proverbs, chapter 12, verse 10 says, the righteous individual considers the life of his or her animal. So we've got these powerful teachings, and yet the way that animals, of course, are treated on factory farms is so far from this. So once again, it's so basic, and I'm trying to reach out. By the way, BeVeg, of which I'm a professor emeritus, they have issued a statement on veganism, and 150 rabbis have signed it. Shmuly, I assume you're one of them, of the 150 rabbis. So there's a start. We're making it different, but we have to reach out to more of them. And that's why, as I said, this New Year for the animals to bring up how we don't have to go for big go to another religion. Judaism has powerful teachings on compassion for animals, and again on health, the environment, so many other things that is very consistent with Jewish teachings and values.
Mm-hmm. So, Rabbi Shmuly, why don't you piggyback on that regarding, some of the Jewish teachings? I think a lot of us, like I'm Jewish, I've not been a religious Jew. I was bat mitzvahed, and that was, it was a reform bat mitzvah. I mean, besides like going to the Chabad on campus in college was more of a social event for me. It was the free dinners, it was good, wholesome community. But if you ask me to talk about the Torah and the religious teachings and the Talmud or the 10 Commandments, where, Dr. Schwartz just said that animals should have the right to also rest on the Sabbath. I mean, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that, that the 10 Commandments said that animals should. I'm sure slaughterhouses are open on Saturdays. They don't get to rest. They're being slaughtered. Except maybe not a kosher slaughterhouse. But I mean, why don't you piggyback on the Jewish principles and the link to veganism and the teachings?
Yeah, there's so much to say. And the first is that, as was pointed out, emerging from the Garden of Eden, from Gan Eden, we know that that's the place we want to get back to, that vegan diet, that ideal world that was constructed for us, where we're not violating the prohibition of tsar balei chayim, of causing pain to animals. And this is to say that we have to work on our characters again, as Dr. Schwartz was just talking about, our character traits of courage, of mercy, of compassion, and of humility. And what it means to be humble, in my view, is to ask oneself, hold oneself accountable for what one does in the world. And just because one isn't the butcher themselves, one isn't the one with the dairy farm themselves, doesn't mean as a consumer they're not held responsible. Judaism teaches everything we do matters. Everything I say, everything I do, everything I participate in. And as consumers, right, that we are ultimately voting our values every time we spend $1.
And that's
And so
what I say at
yeah,
BeVeg with our certification program.
yeah,
That's why we must keep supply chains accountable, because every time you buy a product,
yeah,
if it's certified vegan by BeVeg, then you know you're not only supporting that end product, but you're supplying all the suppliers that you don't know about in the process. And if it's certified, then you know those suppliers haven't tested on animals. You know those
right.
suppliers don't have any source ingredients or any cross-contamination procedures and protocols in place. So your dollar really does support the world you want to live in, because it's a trickle-down effect.
It is, and that's beautifully said. And I think it is the number one way we exercise our power in the world today. That people think of power as voting. Voting is important, but it's rare. And every time we buy food, which is constant, we are voting our values and exercising our power. And it is a religious act. When we spend a shekel, when we spend $1, when we buy something, that is a religious act. People think religion means when I go to the synagogue. Nope. Religion is what we do in the marketplace. My religious values are manifest, are made apparent based on what I buy. And so I think that the question at Sharei Shamayim, the question at the gates of heaven, the first question, actually, it says in the Talmud, is about business ethics, the first question. But also, the question at the gates of heaven is, did you take more from the world, or did you give more to the world? Did you take more, or did you give more? And that is a very high level to have to answer that. Did I take more from the world or give more? And when we eat food that comes from cruelty, we are taking from the world in the most immense and horrific way. And when we make that shift, even with the pleasure of eating food, we are giving to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's ultimately what it means to me to be a Jew. It means, do I care about others? Do I live a compassionate life? Do I exercise my power responsibly? Do I live with an elevated spiritual consciousness where I see the other? The other. What does it mean to see the other? Emmanuel Levinas in the Holocaust, a survivor in the Holocaust and a great French philosopher, said he couldn't believe that Nazis could look him in the eye and not see a human being. That it was almost like they saw through him. He didn't even exist there. And then he says a dog came up to him, and a dog looked him in the eyes and saw him. And he said this dog was the last Kantian in Nazi Germany, the last person who could see him. Only an animal, an animal, and not a non-human animal was able to truly see him. And that's what's happened today as well, is that people have lost their capacity to see the face of another being. Right? Buber, the great Jewish theologian of the 20th century, his whole I and thou theology, which emerged from seeing others as an ends in themselves and not as a means towards my own pleasure, a lot of it emerges from his dialogical encounters with horses and with cats. That in seeing another being awakens the self, it awakens self-consciousness, and thus the birth of ethics emerges in the encounter with the other. And so I think we need to return to the encounter with the animal kingdom in a way that awakens that spiritual consciousness. And so what it means, let me say one last thing, that what it means to be religious is not that you do the rituals. It means the rituals are done in order to awaken a deeper ethical consciousness. If I go to a Passover Seder and it doesn't charge me to go fight oppression, I didn't do a Passover Seder. If I go to Yom Kippur and I fast, and I fasted and I hit my chest and I didn't become more compassionate, it's like I didn't even go to synagogue. In fact, one of the great rabbis said, why is there a prohibition against wearing leather shoes on Yom Kippur? He says, how could you ask God for forgiveness, for mercy, and you're not being merciful yourself? You have an animal on your feet. You have an animal on your feet and you're praying God for compassion? What kind of hypocrisy is this? And so what it means to be religious is not to begin to point outwards. To be a Jew, point outwards at others and what they're doing, but to start at pointing in at myself. What am I doing? What am I doing? And once I have made progress in that, then I can begin the revolution from the inside out.
There's so many beautiful things. Well, there's so many more rabbis saying that. I mean, this is such an important message. Just want to comment on a few things he said. The importance of giving that Shmuly was talking about. I always think of a powerful quotation from the psychologist Eric Fromm. He said, it's not the person who has much who is rich, but the person who gives much. So that's very important. He also talked the importance of seeing, and I want to point out, you mentioned about my book. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see. That Hebrew letter ayin. there was a little country, it's in there. Whoops. I don't know. Okay, there's a Hebrew letter ayin there, and of course it looks like a V. That's why, so it's in vegan and revolution. The V's there. A little controversial. Some people said, "What are you putting there? It's going to confuse people." And I sort of agreed at first, and I did a little bit of thinking. Why is the ayin there? Of course, the simple answer is it's a Hebrew letter, and my book is based on Jewish values. But then I saw a deeper meaning. There's so much in Judaism about that ayin. Ayin is not only a letter; it's also the word see. And my whole book is to get people to see things in different ways. There's a Jewish teaching, Ezahu Chacham HaRo'eh, Ro'eh to see, Ed HaNolad. The wise person is one who sees the possible effects of what he's doing. So we have that important thing. By the way, my book is published by Lantern Publisher, and of course, Lantern's to help people see in the dark with the light. And there's so many other teachings about that. And part of the problem the world has is people are not foreseeing what's happening. One other teaching, there's two Hebrew words, oneg and nega. They have the same letters, nun, gimel, ayin. But the thing is, oneg is a delightful time, you could say oneg Shabbat. Nega is like a plague. So what is the significance here? In the word oneg, which is a delightful thing, the ayin is at the front. They both have an ayin, but there's the front, so that's like symbolizing foreseeing things. Whereas the word nega, which is like a plague, the ayin is at the end of the word, so that you do something and then you look back and try to see it. Other teachings in there, in the Shema, the most important Jewish prayer, in the Torah scroll itself, the ayin, which at the beginning, and the dalet at the end are both enlarged, and that spells out the word witness. So that is the Jewish mission, to be a witness, to be God's witnesses, to see what's happening, as Shmuly is saying, and to recognize we have to challenge the establishment, the status quo, when it's inconsistent with ethics of compassion, justice, sharing, and these are basic Jewish values.
Yeah, I think that goes with everything across all sectors, being able to challenge the status quo, whether it's politics or religion. It's saying, wait a minute, what do I truly believe in when I reflect inward? Are my morals and actions aligned? Am I living my life with integrity? I think these are the questions we need to ask when we vote at the polls, when we buy anything in the supermarket and we purchase with our dollars, or when we make our decisions on, the kind of go ahead, Rabbi Shmuly, you're thinking you're ready to comment, I see.
No, I disagree. Yeah, I agree.
I just want to point out, so I have another book here. It's called Who Stole My Religion? Sort of talking with my Shmuly saying, in a sense of people beating their chest and all and saying, I've sinned and not changing. People going to synagogue and not recognizing where it says so much in there. It's right at the beginning in the synagogue every single day. It says God's compassion is over the earth and over all the creatures. And there's so many things. It says, Nishmat kol hai tivarek es shemcha, that God, every creature is to bless God's name, basically. So we have these powerful teachings. I put in Who Stole My Religion, very positive on Judaism, on Israel. We have some basic teachings. I like to stress that Judaism is really a radical religion in the best sense of the term. The teaching, tzedek tedov, pursue peace, bakei shalom v'rafehu, pursue justice, and the other one, pursue peace. Love thy neighbor as thyself. 36 times in the Torah, more than any other verse, it indicates, be kind to the stranger. We're starting to read about the enslavement of the Israelites, of course, in Egypt. And that is partly so we know what it's like to be oppressed. And therefore, we work to be kind to the stranger and have these kinds of values. So it's a radical religion. Unfortunately, as Shmuly is saying, many people go to the synagogue, and there's a term that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used called religious behaviorism, that people are doing and commendably the rituals. He said that is to wake us up and to be a reminder in terms of what the spiritual and ethical values should be. So sometimes I feel my religion's been stolen. It's such a wonderful religion, but why aren't we speaking out more? I don't know if
it's great what Professor Schwartz is saying, and to connect that with what you're saying also, which is so powerful, is how do we connect this idea of spirituality with ethical integrity? And I think one of the Jewish responses to that is the bracha, the blessing, because what is spirituality? Spirituality can't be contained to this like half-hour experience once a week, right? You go to church, you go to synagogue, like you go to yoga, you go meditate for half hour, then I'm good. Rather, it has to be infused into our daily life to be a spiritual person, right? And so the bracha, the blessing, the Talmud says you should recite 100 times a day, that you pause in your day to pause for the sanctity of the moment and to fill yourself with gratitude and with responsibility and the holiness of the moment, right? Radical amazement, to pick on Heschel, right? Of this moment. And when is the most common way we make a bracha? Is on food. And so when we eat food, this is not just about social bonding. This is not just about our need for nutrition. This is also about spiritual elevation. That when I eat food, I'm going to pause and make a blessing before this food to remind myself of the integrity involved, remind myself of my deepest values, and that this is a moment. And so now veganism is not, for those who aren't vegan yet, just a sacrifice. Oh, I got to eat what? And I got to go find it. Rather, this is a moment of self-actualization. I can become my best self. I can become spiritually enlightened through the power of the blessing of actualizing this moral integrity.
Well said.
Beautiful.
Yes. This is why you're so influential. You have the gift of words and putting it together. I mean, we're running low on time, so I want you guys to have the opportunity to say anything else that you may have felt that we've left out and open the conversation. I don't really want to direct it, so Rabbi Shmuly, why don't you pick up where you left off?
Amazing. So, in the spirit of blessings, I just want to give a blessing to people watching today, listening today, to continue to have strength in your work, and certainly for you and for this great show you're leading here, and for Professor Schwartz, who's been doing this for decades and decades, to have strength to continue to put this message out in the world, because it gets exhausting. It can feel like people aren't listening and legislators are going the opposite direction and communities aren't responding, but the progress is real. We are moving in the right direction. We should be strengthened by that. The progress in the business sector, the progress in the political sphere, progress on the religious front. And I hope that we can create more interfaith collaborative spaces where each of us brings the fullness of our own tradition, religious tradition or spiritual tradition, and we don't minimize our own unique differences, but also see the power of how this can be our uniting force. We have different conceptions of God, different historical consciousness, different spiritual practices, and yet this is where we come together. We come together to see how we unite around this compassion revolution, this vegan revolution, in order that we can create a sustainable change here together.
Sustainable and systemic. And I think it's important that, all major religions that are historical and cultural are based on these higher elevated loving principles. Where we go wrong is when we're infusing the ancient barbaric traditions into our modern day religions and feeling like we have to stay married to those traditions in order to carry out our religious practice. And in turn, I feel like that religion was given to us in different forms by different people as a framework within which to live the same enlightened life, where our guiding principle is love and compassion and ethics. And religion is a wonderful tradition to surround yourself with family and friends, but we must question the principles that are ancient and barbaric within our religions that no longer align with the integrity of the lives that we wish to live for the betterment of humanity. And the betterment of humanity means we are kind to not only each other, but to all sentient beings on this planet, because it's all connected. Dr. Schwartz, any final thoughts or words?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to point out that people want more information about a connection of Judaism, vegetarianism, veganism, animal rights. I have over 250 articles at the website, and it's Jewish Veg, one word, jewishveg.com, and then a slash, and then my last name, SCHWARTZ. I also have the full text of the third edition of my book, Judaism, Vegetarianism, and another book that is more broad and other issues on hunger and energy and population, etc. It's called Judaism and Global Survival. And if people want to work on this, I hope they'll maybe contact me. Maybe want to work on it too, but say that the idea of restoring that ancient New Year for animals. So that my email address, veggierich@gmail.com. That's VEGGIE. RICH, first four letters of my last name, veggierich at gmail.com. Also, I'd like to urge everybody watching, listening to this program to go to their rabbis very respectfully and ask them to put this issue on their agenda. By the way, I mentioned the 250 articles. One of them is a dialogue between a rabbi and a Jewish veg activist. And that gives some ideas of the dialogue. You know, we like to have respectful dialogues on that. And again, the key point, you know, I've said it before, that vegan diets are most consistent with the most fundamental Jewish teachings. Again, taking care of our health, treating animals with compassion, protecting the environment, helping hungry people, conserving resources, seeking and pursuing peace. And also, shift to vegan diets can eliminate the epidemic of diseases afflicting Jewish people. And at a time when climate experts are saying we may have only until 2030, less than 10 years away now, to make quote unquote unprecedented changes that would have a chance to avert a climate catastrophe, that it's essential we shift to vegan diets. You know, there were two studies very quickly. One of them was not from the Sierra Club, protect people for the ethical treatment of animals. It was from the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. And they pointed out an amazing thing, that the so-called livestock sector emits more greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide equivalents, than all the cars, planes, trains, ships, all the means of transportation in the world combined, largely because of cows emitting methane, a very potent greenhouse gas. So we can make such a difference. And by the way, the military experts are very concerned. They feel that there's going to be tens of millions desperate fleeing refugees from the droughts, wildfire storms. We've seen it already in California and all. And the desperate refugees, that's going to make terrorism and war far more likely. So that it's important. I mentioned before that one of the reasons is for veganism is to be consistent with seeking and pursuing peace. And people may wonder what is the connection, but the Jewish sages saw that the words lechem for bread and melchama for war come from the same root. They deduced from that with the shortage of grain and other resources, people are more likely to go to war. And that's borne out by the history, battles over the well in biblical times, battles over oil now, and then same maybe battles over water. And it takes 13 times as much water on an animal-based diet than on a vegan diet. And again, so there's a connection. So I've come up, by the way, committed a bit of a pun. The slogan of the peace movement and the slogan of the vegan movement should be one and the same. Same slogan, vegan movement and peace movement. All we're saying is give peas a chance. Forget a little bit of a pun. Okay, so again, the case for veganism is so super strong. We just have to get that message out. Unfortunately, the other side has billions of dollars for propaganda. You know, you need milk. You have milk mustaches. Some meat makes a person strong. We have truth, morality, and justice on our side, and that's why Carissa so happy to be in this program. And I commend you strongly for your years of service. You have much continued success, but we have to get the word out and. Through Tubishvat, through the renewed Jewish New Year for animals, and in every other way. You know, people should write letters to editors every day there's some connection. If there's a heat wave, climate change, hunger, health, all connected to vegan diets, and that can make a big, big difference.
And I don't think we should underestimate the power of social media, especially in this time when social media is banning the president of the United States. So one really valuable way to possibly just get the message out is sharing this show across all platforms, Jewish ones as well, where you can get to the rabbis in the sectors that may not be vegan yet, that may not be preaching this peaceful message, or to give peas a try. I think that, thank you so much for joining me on today's show. I have to move on to the second part of this segment, where we feature a certified vegan by BeVeg brand or company. And we have a restaurant that we certified vegan in Chile called India Box. So I have to move on to the next part of the segment, but thank you guys so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed this conversation and talking to you.
Thank you so much.
You're doing great work in the world. So, share this out, go back to the comments, write in the comments, respond to the comments. We've had lots of comments today. Put your links, put your books, put your contact information there, and just share it out. You never know who's going to watch a show or watch a message or hear it. And you don't know how many people could change just from one show or one word or one thought. So
many thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay,
now.
Have a pleasure.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Carissa. How are you?
Indian Box in Chile, vegan certified restaurant by BeVeg. How are you? How's business? How's operations in the pandemic? How's veganism?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us to the show. We're very happy and proud to be this show. And also, I feel very enlightened, very rich in new knowledge that we could gain with Dr. Schwartz and Dr. Yanklowitz. Thank you for putting us together. Well, in terms of business, everyone would think that due to the pandemic, restaurant lines would close or reduce the sales. But in our case, thanks to the pandemic, we're growing more and more.
Really?
People are yes.
That's not common for a lot of vegan restaurants. A lot of them are suffering. Some, that's great. Why? What's your secret sauce?
Fortunately, we've been able to transmit this message that this pandemic, these lockdowns, these quarantines, these people dying, it's just because of what they eat. It's not because of the bat that produces the coronavirus. It's because their demand of meat and dead animals has produced this crisis, this social crisis, this economic crisis, and this pandemic, this medical crisis in the world. So as we could transmit this message, we've been opening people's mind and try to buy products which are not animal-based. And the message we obviously can't transmit is that it's not $1. Obviously, today we're not the $1 product, but yes, those $2 that you're going to be spending are going to be spending a food which is pure, which is lactose-free, cholesterol-free, and the most important thing, it's free of suffering, free of death, free of Holocaust, and certified by BeVeg.
Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to hear that business is going well. Tell us a little bit about veganism in Chile and the movement. Is it strong?
Well, it was a trend 5 years ago. Today is part of a very, very strong movement. There are at least 50 vegan restaurants in Santiago, which is the capital.
50.
One of the most
15 or 550 or 15?
50.
Okay.
Yes, most of them are not doing that well, but there are many that are opening now. And the most important thing about veganism in Chile is that, well, in Chile is not known by producing products. It's known by importing products. So the offer and the supply that we have in Chile is thanks to many of our importers, which are gathering all the products in the world and giving it to us. In one supermarket, we don't have one option or two options of dairy milk. We've got at least 50 or 60 options of many other countries. So fortunately, the supply we have of vegan product, it's huge. We've got the best products of the UK, the best product of the US, the best product of Italy, the best from Singapore, as we don't produce. And that demand created the need of a Chilean company to be one of the most innovating companies in the world for veganism product, like very similar to Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. There is a company in Chile that's called Not Company. They produce plant-based milk. The name is Not Milk. They produce Not Cheese. The name is Not Cheese. And it's part of the normal people today. It's not part of this trendy movement of millennials that they want to have a diet, vegan diet, be fitness. It's part of the normal routine of normal people who want to eat and want to drink good products.
Yeah.
So we don't have differentiation between vegan products and normal products. It's just the not milk, for example.
I think one thing to really push for vegan products and vegan restaurants, especially a certified vegan restaurant like yourself, is the principles of food safety and how vegan food is clean food, especially in a pandemic where it was, arguably started in a wet market, which is from cross-contamination of animal materials and spillover. There's no debate that this is coronavirus is a disease of animal origin. There is a debate of where it began, but there's no debate that it's of animal origin. So when it comes to food safety and even all the product recalls in the market, most of them are because of Ebola or E. coli or some animal contamination. So to be able to go to a vegan-only restaurant, a vegan-certified restaurant, or to go to another establishment that has vegan certified practices in place where they underwent training programs to make sure that their practices are following protocol, that have vegan awareness training and have instituted principles to avoid cross-contamination with animal material, then we are not only promoting a vegan lifestyle, which is based on ethical beliefs like we discussed earlier in the segment, but we are also, for those that are non-vegans out there, addressing things like food safety, cleanliness, and allergens. So being able to, in a pandemic especially, market that as a vegan restaurant should be a strength rather than a weakness because of the pandemic. So I hope other vegan restaurants can catch on to this message, because it's not just about, gosh, we have these lockdowns, these restaurants are closing down. Okay, we have these lockdowns because of cross-contamination. And hey, I'm a vegan restaurant. I have none of that. There is no cross-contamination here.
Exactly. Well, we market that. It's top of vegan option. No more vegan option. It's 100% vegan. Mm-hmm. You don't have to ask if there's cross-contamination. Everything is vegan. So that's the message that we could transmit. And fortunately, people receive this message in a very positive way. And they prefer eating our food because they know that they can eat safe. They don't have to think about if they use the same cutting board or not.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. So in other establishments or when it comes to product certification, when it might be a shared facility, for example, because the reality is that most products today are manufactured in shared facilities. So there is a food safety concern. And where BeVeg is different than other vegan certification trademarks or companies is not only are we an ISO accredited vegan standard that is quite robust in training and in our technical standard, but we certify manufacturing facilities, not just products, which means we go into the facilities with auditors that are ISO trained and training programs, and we ask them to put and to draft into the scope of their standard operating procedures, whether it's a restaurant or a facility. We want it drafted into their standard operating procedures, mechanisms that they have in place to control any chance and reduce any chance of product recall and cross-contamination. What does that mean? It means, like, for example, that there's going to be physical segregation of the products in the storage room and the unpacking room. It means that containers are going to be color-coded for waste materials. So container materials won't become a container for a vegan intended production run. It means that the vegan intended production runs in shared facilities are triple washed and at the beginning of the day, not throughout the day, in the middle of the day, not switching between vegan and non-vegan production runs throughout the day where there could be animal residue left on the equipment. It means that there are procedures in place where people are trained on what vegan is and that there's protocol in place so the vegan production runs and the vegan production lines are treated as seriously as a kosher production line, a gluten production line, an allergen production line, because we need to remove and reduce the disclosures on products that say may contain milk or dairy, may contain. It shouldn't contain it. If it's vegan certified, there should be no may contain, because protocols are in place at the factory level to make sure the production runs and the entire staff and the management are trained and that the policies and procedures are accessible to them. So it's really
well, let me add something into that. It is very important to implement these protocols, but it's something that is also very important is to create this awareness in people, in those who are demanding, because today I know many vegans who say, oh, I don't care that the pizza has cheese, I'll remove the cheese and eat it. They don't care yet, because we call it the new vegans. Those who are in process to have this spiritual belief, not something like a diet. So we need to create first this awareness that we don't want to mix up stuff, but not because it's contaminated. It's because why do we want to create this differentiation?
Yes, but that depends on who you're speaking to, right? The ethical vegan, yes, we don't want the contamination. We don't want the karma of that food or that energy, because like the earlier part of the show, the rabbis were saying that eating food is a blessing. It could be an elevated experience, right? So being a vegan means that the blessing of the experience of the food you're eating should be elevated. Okay, so if you're spiritual about it, you don't want any animal contamination, you don't want any cross-contamination, and you understand the importance of having practices and procedures in place because energetically you're a spiritual person and you do not want to consume or participate in any suffering or fear on any level, but you believe in meditation and yoga and a compassionate lifestyle. That's one type of person. Then there's the type of person that is just living off of fear, right? We're in a pandemic right now. The news feeds us fear. And then what do? We go and eat fear and suffering on our plate. But you know what that fear also feeds? Fear of cross-contamination, fear of having food supplies that are cross-contaminated. So whether you're vegan or not, you should care if you have a vegan certified product and claim and service, if you care about no cross-contamination, if you care about cleanliness, if you care about food safety, if you care about product safety, and if you care about religion or spirituality or compassion or justice or integrity, you should vote with your dollar and support the products that are vegan at the root level, completely no cruelty, no animal testing, risk assessed, and
something very important what you said. It's about the certification, because today there are many companies or restaurants which are offering this kind of products in obviously cross-contamination lines, and they would say, we do our best to respect the cross-contamination, but it's not certified. I mean, the certification is very important because we implement protocols and processings which are very difficult to implement, but you have to train, and obviously, it's a work that organizations like BeVeg are encouraging us to do and to respect.
Mm-hmm. And I want to address like what Patty's saying right now about the fine line. And also Tina, she's saying that, they care about gluten-free, they don't really care about vegan. And Patty brings up a good point about the fine line that, you don't want to turn away options or facilities offering vegan options, because then we do more harm. And she also says we need certification to hold them accountable. So I just want to address that, because I had this conversation with Jane Velez Mitchell last week on the air on Voice America, and we discussed how the Burger King case that happened, that's in litigation right now, how Burger King is being sued for putting a Whopper on the grill with the meat, with the juices being shared, and they're advertising it saying 100% Whopper, 0% beef, right? So it was a lawsuit that's being brought because it's not 0% beef, because it's cross-contamination, which is true, right? On a legal level, that's true. But Jane brought up the point, are we doing more harm than good? Is this the wrong case to bring to get our point across? Because here we have Burger King trying to advertise and promote the Impossible Whopper, right? Which means less animals die. So it is a fine line. I think the importance of certification, though, is not to restaurants offering the options, because and restaurant certification is very different than factory certification. Manufacturing certification means that there are protocols in place that are very systematic in terms of very loud there. So manufacturing procedures are different at facilities for products because they have systematic procedures in place on how to control the ingredients and product changes and barcodes and assembly lines and production lines and the training and in the unpackaging room, in the washroom, in the waste room. It's very systematic according to global food safety and HACCP plans. So it's a lot easier to control that and to have the systems in place. For restaurants, it's slightly different. You can't control it to the same level, and that's known for allergens as well. Allergen claims at restaurants and manufacturing facilities have the same type of crossover, less ability to control in a restaurant than in a manufacturing facility that packages products for sale in grocery chains or retail markets. But the point is still important for certification in restaurants in that restaurants must go through training. And they need to understand, and everyone in the kitchen needs to understand what vegan awareness training is and how they can exercise vegan hygiene and vegan etiquette in the kitchen with policies that they should have instituted to minimize the level of cross-contamination so we can maintain our level and commitment to vegan integrity. At BeVeg, we just added Heather Landax to our chief compliance team. She's a restaurant auditor in the UK. She's been doing allergy restaurant consulting and auditing for, I think, 20 years in over 1,000 restaurants, major restaurant chains in 8 different countries. She's a vegan, and she's helped draft our restaurant standard to help us bring restaurant protocol into not so much the vegan restaurants, because the vegan dedicated restaurants like yourself, Bhavan, like India Box, is not at risk really for cross-contamination so long as you have protocol in place to not contaminate the cutlery. If you have people working there, they take it outside. You need to have procedures in place in order to not have cross-contamination there. But the awareness and training really needs to happen in the facilities and the establishments in the hospitality sector that are trying to cater to the vegan community and aren't exactly yet. They need training. So the importance of certification when it comes to business services, different for products, but business services comes down to a training program. So,
totally, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree totally. And thank you very much for giving us this opportunity of being on the show. And
yeah. So tell us a little final words, final thoughts on India Box. Where exactly are you? Where can we find you? How can people order?
Today, you can only find us in Chile, but we're working to expand ourselves to the US, to the European market, and in a very short future, even to India. It's the largest vegetarian market in the world. And we believe that in the future, India is going to be the largest vegan country in the world. It's just one product that they're missing, which is milk. And it's difficult to remove it from their culture, from their cuisine. So you can find us on our social media, Indian Box on Instagram, Indian Box CL on Facebook. Check our website, www.indianbox.com. In a very soon future, we hope to be with you in the United States, Canada, Europe, Mexico.
Franchise.
Sorry?
A franchise?
We are trying to work on a model. Maybe the first restaurants will be our own, and in the future we'll start with the franchising model.
Mm-hmm. And you're the first vegan certified restaurant, I think, in the world that's Indian. And you might
exactly.
be
Many restaurants normally they have vegan options, but as you say, they can't control. People are not trained. People are not able to understand what are the differences between a clean cutting board and a clean spoon or utensils. So this training and this certification is very much required in order to assure the quality of a vegan product.
Well, thank you, Bhavan. Thank you, and congratulations on your certification. I know you're one of the first ones we signed up, and you're up for renewal soon. So we're glad to have you on board, and glad that you're thriving in the pandemic and not surviving. And I hope to visit you
very much.
And try
well,
out.
The certification has helped us a lot. People believe in us because they know everything is vegan and we're certified. So thank you a lot for having this organization brought to us in Chile.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and for everyone else, thank you for sticking with us today. It's been a long and insightful segment with a lot of great guests, and we'll be back here next week, same time, same place, on the laws that matter on Jane Unchained News Network, which is 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, noon Eastern Standard Time. Bye.